It's that zesty flow, no Shima flow. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's that zesty flow.
Why you will be using a throw keyword is when you want to explicitly call some exception, right? So in the last class, I clearly told you it is not generally used for a system defined exceptions to be called. System defined exception, system will call if there is error, right? 99.9% of a time you will be using a throw keyword with respect to customized exceptions. That means according to your requirement, if you want to call any user defined exception, then you will be using a throw keyword, right? So just for the sake of understanding, I'm using a throw keyword with respect to system defined exceptions also. Okay, and we came to a clear conclusion that once you are writing a throw, after that particular throw keyword, if you have any statements, those statements will not be executed. Clear? Right. If you want to avoid this particular, that means if you want to handle this particular exception, you can write this particular statement. That means you can include this particular statement under a try catch block, right? So when you are writing a something in a try catch, what does it means? You are expecting some exception and you are going to handle that particular exception using a catch block. Right? So now what happens? In a public, so means in a main function, you are writing a try block. So and you are calling your system built-in exception, right? Explicitly by using a keyword called a throw. Okay. So once this particular arithmetic exception has been raised, so that particular arithmetic exception has been caught in a catch block, right? So now if I am executing this particular program, exception will be arised and it will be caught and it will display high from a catch, right? So what you need to observe here is you have not performed any arithmetic operation, but you are raising that particular arithmetic exception explicitly by using a keyword called a throw, right? So one more important conclusion is once a throw statement has been occurred, so next statements after that particular throw will not be executed. Okay. So with respect to last class, we have a so means we have a said one more point also. For a throw keyword, arguments can be a throwable object, right? So this one we called it as a throwable object. First type, that means this can be one of the argument for the throw. Second one is an exception, right? So you will be cutting here, right? You will be catching an exception here, right? So this particular object, right? So the object created in a catch block can be reference, can be argument for your throw, right? So simple conclusion is if you are writing a throw, then the next value, that means the next reference, the next value after a throw should be a throwable object. Okay, how you are creating that particular object? Either using a new keyword or the object which you are using with respect to catch block. Any of these two can be passed with respect to throw keyword, right? So these are the things which we have discussed in the last class. If you have any questions, you can post those questions in the chat box. If no questions, we need to discuss one more small point with respect to throw, then we will see example using a throw. If I run this particular program, right? So initially high from a catch, high from the catch. Later you wrote a throw followed by E, so it is going to throw exception. What type of exception it is throwing? It is throwing exception which is called as arithmetic exception. No questions? Shall we proceed further with respect to throw? A small point need to be discussed with respect to throw. Then we will see an example using then we will see an example how to go with the customized exception classes. That means how to create a customized exception class. Shall I modify a program? Okay, so no response in the chat box. Let me just remove this particular catch block, remove this particular try also, this also, right? Okay. Now, if I am executing my program, which is something like this, what will be the output? Right? 1 second. Right. Here, when I was executing a program just by writing a throw new arithmetic exception, the output what I was getting is exception in the thread. Observe the what exception it is giving you carefully. Then we will discuss a few points with respect to this. Right. Exception in a thread, right? Main java.lang.arithmetic exception at test.main test.java at the line number 5. All right. So now here for this particular, is this a class, right? Arithmetic exception is nothing but a class, correct? Now with respect to this particular discussion, at any point if you are not able to understand any instructions whatever I'll be giving, you stop me there itself and ask me a question. All right. So now what I'm saying is throw is a keyword which is used to throw some exception explicitly. That is a throw keyword. Right. So what it is expecting? It is expecting object of a throwable class. It is expecting object of a throwable class, right? So as I need to create an object, I'll be writing a new keyword is used for creating object, right? Yes, using a new. I am calling a class name followed by this particular brackets, right? Is it something like I am calling a default constructor? Correct, right? Throw new followed by class name with this particular parenthesis is nothing but a default constructor you are calling. Clear? Now, let me pass some argument with respect to this. Right? Say something like this. Can it be called as a constructor of a arithmetic exception which is expecting some string? Correct? Yes. Let me just cross check my program. What will be the output? Will it show any error? So nothing it is showing. That means there is a constructor which accepts string as the argument. Right. Now, what is the difference between the two outputs? Right? Here, when I was not passing an argument, it was only printing java.lang.arithmetic exception. It was not giving you any description about that. Right? Now, if I have passed an argument, if I have passed some string argument, what it is giving? After a colon, that means after a java.lang.arithmetic exception colon, it is giving me description about that, why that particular error has been raised. Or else let me do one more small change. Let me comment this particular throw. Now here let me perform int a is equal to 2 divided by 0, just to show you how differently it will print the output for you. Compiled, running, right? So in this case, what it is printing? Description it is printing as divided by 0. correct? So in this case, I have commented this particular throw keyword. So what was the error we have done? We have done a is equal to 2 by 0. So after arithmetic, so means after java.lang.arithmetic exception, after it is putting some colon and giving you a description which is called as slash, that means divided by 0. Because of that particular divided by 0, exception has been raised. This is the indication, right? So if I was, so means when I was using a throw keyword by passing this particular argument, can I now say that this particular argument has been taken as description for the exception? Means my question is, can you relate these two error statements? Right? So the bottom one is saying that this particular exception has been raised just because of divided by 0. Right? So and the upper one is saying that this particular exception has been raised because of this particular reason. That reason might be nowhere related to this particular aspect, but I'm just relating your thing, saying that here wherever you are passing a string as an argument, that will be considered as description for your error. Clear? Now here you are explicitly writing this particular information, so I can say that as you are writing a description, so it is printing that particular description. But in a later case, you have not written anything like a divided by 0 need to be printed, nothing like that, right? It is only printing some information. That means this particular information, somewhere it is written in a JVM, right? So what I'm saying is, this description of exception you are giving explicitly, but here description of exception you are not writing, system is printing by somewhere, right? So there is some method which is going to print these kind of descriptions, right? Now all these descriptions, right? So after this one, after exception, you will be having some description for exception, right? So the description of an exception, description of the exception will be written by a method called as print stack trace, right? So there is a method, where exactly this method is there? This method is there, this method is there from throwable class. Okay, so you remember that particular hierarchy, right? So you will be having a throwable class, under that you will be having exception and errors. Exception in turn will be having a runtime exception. Now this particular throwable class will be having a method called a print stack trace. This particular print stack trace method is responsible for printing the descriptions of the exception. Clear with the print stack trace? And you should remember this particular hierarchy every time whenever we are discussing this particular concept of exceptions. Let me write that particular hierarchy. You will be having a class called throwable, not writing a complete statement, throwable. So this throwable will be extended by a class called exceptions, and this particular class has been extended by what is called as runtime exception. This is RE, that is runtime exception. From this particular runtime exception, with respect to our example, we are taking what is called as arithmetic exception, right? And who will be a parent for this particular throwable class? Object class, right? So now what I'm saying is, whenever you are passing arithmetic exception, CSK performance was very good, right? So now this particular string, right, that is a string constructor, right? So this will be handled to runtime exception, and in turn it will be handled to exception. In turn it will be handled to your throwable. So in a throwable, you will be having something called as print stack trace method, which is responsible for printing whatever the string you are going to pass. Is that clear with respect to print stack trace? Single statement, if you want to say about a print stack trace, means this is the method which is responsible for printing the description of the exception. If you are clear, then we will see few points with respect to a PPT. Then we will see one example of how to perform, so means how to create a customized exception class. Yes, sir. Okay. Right. And most of the points we have discussed with respect to last class also. In today's class, whatever we have discussed, it means we have discussed extra with respect to print stack trace, right? Okay. Right. So let us quickly see few points with respect to a PPT. Then it will be it's like just kind of a revision of whatever the things we have discussed with respect to throw. Then we can easily understand a program whatever we are going to write. Okay. Right. Throw is used to throw an exception explicitly. Right. Agreed for this one. General form is throw followed by throwable instance. Right. Agreed for this. Here, throwable instance must be an object of a type of throwable or subclass of a throwable. Anything, object of a throwable directly or any subclass. We were using arithmetic exception. That is a subclass of throwable class. Primitive types such as int or char, as well as non-throwable classes such as a string and an object, cannot be used as exceptions, right? You cannot write throw new some object. You cannot say any object, right? So you cannot write throw new some string. It cannot be written. So it is saying that it should be only subclasses of your throwable, and the object should be of a throwable object only, right? So none of a primitive or none of a classes, something like a string or arrays, cannot be used as these particular throwable objects. Clear? There are two ways you can obtain a throwable object, right? Using a parameter in a catch clause or creating one with a new keyword. I have shown you both the things. One by using a new keyword, and another one is by taking an argument of that particular catch block, right? So the flow of execution stops immediately after a throw statement. We have seen it was a throwing error saying that system.out.println is not reachable because you have a throw statement written before that. Any subsequent statements are not executed. Once a throw has been occurred, so subsequent statements will not be executed. The nearest enclosing try block is inspected to see if it has a catch statement that matches the type of an exception. So we have written one exception in a try block. So whenever the exception was raised, so the nearest catch block was inspected whether it is able to be handled by that particular catch block or not, right? So if it didn't found any catch block written, then the control will be transferred to your JVM, right? Then if no matching catch is found, then the default exception handler, which is a default exception handler that we will see, then the default exception handler halts the program and prints the stack trace, right? So if you have not written any catch block for that particular exception, JVM will give that control to a default exception handler, and whatever is there a description with respect to print stack trace, that will be printed for your screen. Clear with all the points? I'll give you 2 minutes to go through the points. If you have any questions with respect to any of the points, we will wait for some time, then we will go with example. I'm giving you 2 minutes to go through the points that we have discussed with respect to throw statement. If you don't have any questions, you can just give me acknowledgement in the chat box. Then I'll give you a description about which example we are talking about. We need to talk about. Any questions? I didn't get a throw, sir. Shabula, single statement means if you are saying some point in a throw, then I can explain. Throw statement we have started in the last class. Today also I gave a description. Yesterday's recording you might have checked. Today's from the starting I have explained once again. Garima, sir, 8th point. Okay, so what is that 8th point? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any subsequent statements are not executed. See, once there is a throw statement written, after the throw statement, if you have any statements, those things will not be executed. It will throw you an error message. I shown you an example. I wrote a throw new arithmetic exception. Below to that, I wrote a something like a system.out.println followed by hi message. So it was showing that system.out.println is not reachable. Right? So what does it mean? Means throw, so means by the time you go to a throw keyword, execution will be stopped. So the statement which you are writing after that particular throw is unreachable code. Why you are writing that particular code? It was a saying. So 7th and yeah, it's a continuation. 7th and 8th points, it's a continuation. Yes, sir, but I checked the record also, but I am confused still now. Okay, so we will discuss one example now. After that example also, if you are in same confusion state, then we will revise the throw statement. Watch. Okay, super. Okay. So statement of a program is something like this. Say for example, you are developing a website. So this website is some matrimony website. Okay, some matrimony website you are developing. Now, you should not allow all the users to start with a searching for a bridegroom or a bride, right? So there will be an age limit for this particular matrimony site, right? So what I mean to say is, if a age is from, say for example, if we will take a normal range, if age is ranging from 21 to 59, okay, so you need to allow these people to browse for the things, right? So you can allow them for a browsing. Now if a age is less than 19, right, so you need to throw exception, you need to throw an exception saying that you are too young for finding match, right? If age is below 9, let us, we have considered 21, right? Okay, so if a age is below 21, you have to raise the exception saying that you are too young for finding a match, right? Now if age is greater than 60, right, so you need to print a message. So means you need to throw exception saying that you are too old for finding match. right? So this is the requirement with respect to my particular application. So means my particular example. Now, what I need to have is, I need to have two classes, right? So one exception class is something like toYoung. This is one of the exception class. When this particular exception need to be raised, if our age is less than 21, right? I have another exception class which is too old. Okay, so this is another exception class, and this particular exception need to be raised if our age is more than 60, right? Now you may ask me, sir, this particular requirement can be done just by if and else statement. Why you want to go with exceptions? Correct? Can be done with respect to if and else statements also, but we are discussing a topic called exceptions. So if we are going, so means question is, can you do these kind of things with respect to exceptions by using exception classes, right? So that is the question. That means I want this particular requirement need to be implemented by using user defined exceptions. Clear with the question means I will proceed with the typing a program. If you have any doubts with respect to question means, we will address those doubts, then we will see an example. Okay. Now, so let me start writing the code. I'll explain each and every step. Okay. We create a file, custom exception.java. Class custom exception, public static void main string args. Right. So nothing has been written, just a prototype of my program I wrote. Right. So now what we have said, we need to have two classes. One is toYoung exception and another one is too old exception, right? So now let me create two classes now. Class toYoung, right? So this is one of the exception, right? Now class too old, this is one of the exception, right? We are just writing the classes, and I am saying like that is a one of exception, this is another class for exception, right? So now if you want to make a normal classes as exception classes, if you want to make normal classes as, question in the chat box, sir, BITH, I didn't get your question, Garima. Is it related to this example what I am talking? Okay, so let me finish this explanation, later I'll take this question. Okay, so now what I was saying is, I have just declared the two normal classes and I am saying like whether these things are exception classes or what, right? So let me write first a main method, then I will discuss about these two classes, right? So what is our condition? Our condition is something like this. I need to have an age value, right? If it is something like a 19, okay. Now, if age is less than 21, if age is less than 21, I have to call a exception, right? I have to call a exception through new. What kind of exception you wanted to call? Is it too young or too old? Too young, right? I wanted to call what is called as toYoung exception. Correct. Now, else if age is greater than 60, correct? If age is greater than 60, what I need to call? Through new, Too old exception. Correct. Too old exception I have called. Now, if this is not the case, right, I have only two conditions. If this is not the case, I will write system.out.println of soon you will find a match. Correct? Right? Overview I have written. I am not created my customized exception classes. I just wrote a overview. What I said, initially I have taken age is equal to some value. Now I am checking if age is less than 21. I wanted to throw this particular exception. If age is greater than 60, I wanted to throw this particular exception. Right? Whether these things are, see, what was required with respect to throw keyword? It was expecting a throwable object. That means this particular object, whatever you are going to write, right? So this particular object, whether it is a throwable classes, so means whether this particular class is related to throwable class. Not related, right? So you have just created a normal class. How a normal class will be related to some exception class? Correct? What you have done, you have just creating object of a normal class, right? So what is expected with respect to throw? Throw is expecting some throwable object, not a normal classes object. Correct? What was another statement with respect to throw? We have said throw will be expecting either an object of a throw. Throw will be expecting either object of a throw or subclass of that particular throw. Right? Was the same point which was there in the PPT. Right? So what was the point? Throw will be expecting either object of a throwable or subclass of that particular throwable class. Now, can I make this particular toEng class as a subclass of a throwable? Can we make our normal class as a subclass of a throwable? Can we make? If yes, how to make? Don't know, sir. Subclass means, can I say child class? You have a throw keyword, right? So what does it mean? When the age is less than 21, you wanted to throw this particular exception, right? So how user defined exceptions will be thrown? By using a throw keyword. Yes, using a throw keyword. For a throw keyword, what should be the argument? It should be object of a throwable, right? I'm saying, is it the object of a throwable class now? No, I'm giving you a clarification. This is not object of your throwable class because this is just a normal class. Right? So now my intention is I wanted to make this particular class, that is a toEng class, as a subclass of a throwable class. How to make some class as a subclass of some other class? Extend. Yes, by extending, right? So if I want to make this particular toEng class as a subclass of a throwable, I have to extend this particular class something like this. Now toEng will become subclass of a throwable class, right? So if I write like this, whether this particular statement will become a valid now. Throw is expecting throwable object. Am I passing a throwable object itself? Instead of writing a throwable, if I am writing exception, will it be a subclass of that particular throwable class still? Don't forget hierarchy. toEng is extending exception class. Extending means that will become a child class, right? Toeng will become a child class of a exception class. Who is the parent of exception class? Your throwable. Obviously, again a toeng will become a child class of your throwable class itself. Can it be written something like this? If I write toeng extends runtime exception, will it become a child class of a throwable still? Yes, runtime exception is a child class of your exception. Exception is a child class of your throwable. Obviously, toeng will also become a child class of a throwable indirectly. May not be directly, indirectly. Your toeng class can be made as child class of a throwable class, either directly extending a throwable class, or by extending exception class, or by extending runtime exception class. Using all these ways, you can make your class, whatever class you have defined as a part of exception class. This is nothing but customized class that you are going to define. Can I proceed? Once I make a class toeng extends runtime exception, what I'm making is I am including toeng class as subclass for my exceptions. Huh. Can I proceed now? Means can I proceed with my explanation now? Right. So similarly, I will extend this particular toOld class also with respect to runtime exception. Intention is just to add these classes as a subclasses for my exception class. Now let us analyze this statement again. Throw new toEng. Now this particular toEng is a subclass of exception, so the object if you are creating means that will be a throwable object itself, valid with respect to this. Now when I am creating an object, will it be calling a default constructor by default? When I am creating object, it will be calling my default constructor. Correct. When I am throwing this particular exception, I wanted to print something to the user, right? If I am not writing anything, what he will come to know? Let me run the program and show you what I am actually thinking about. I'll tell you. Copied javac dot java. What it is printing? Customized exception dot main. That means it is saying that there is a toEng exception raised and no description has been written for that. Jagdish, I'll answer once I finish explanation. Right? So if I'm executing at this particular point, what it is showing, what it is just showing like toEng. Yes, toEng has been raised. There should be some statement written, right? So what is the statement we have expected according to our program requirement? If age is less, we have said that you are too young for finding a match. This information I wanted to display, right? If age is less, I wanted to display this particular information. Now, with respect to my program, where I need to write those statements. Correct? Huh. Now, when I am creating object, will it be creating a constructor? Will it be calling a constructor over here? Can I call a constructor here? System dot out dot println. I will just copy that particular statement and paste it here. Right? So let me just run my program and cross check. What it is printing? You are too young for finding a match. Yes, it has executed a constructor. It has printed that particular statement. Along with that, it is printing a one more statement saying that exception. Right? Do you want a print statement something like this itself, or after a exception colon this exception has been raised because of you are too young for finding a match? How you wanted to print output? Are you comfortable in a printing output something like this? Or after this particular too young, I wanted a colon, for that particular colon, you are too young for finding a match. There I wanted to print this description. Can it be done? Did you understood my question? Now also program is working fine. No problem with respect to program. Age is less than 19, age is less than 21, so it is calling a toEng, right? So when a toEng has been called, it is executing this particular constructor. Inside a constructor, you wrote this particular statement, and that particular statement, it is printing fine. Everything is working fine now, right? But what is my requirement is, I don't want a system.out.println statement to be printed for this exception. After this particular statement, toEng, I wanted to write a colon and I wanted to print a description. That means I wanted the information something like this, something like java.lang.arithmetic exception colon CSK performance was very good. See, with exception, it is printing a description. I want statement something like that, not a separate system.out.println statement, something like this. Right? Now what has to be done? This thing you should not print, rather this statement need to be printed by print stack trace. Come on sir, so much complicated. Things are simple. I don't want to print this particular statement by using a system.out.println statement. Rather, I want this particular information need to be printed by print stack trace. How to make a print stack trace to print this particular information? Simple, nothing is there. Just copy whatever statement you wanted to print. Copy whatever statement you wanted to print. Double quote. Pass it as an argument. Right? When you are passing it as an argument, do you require a constructor which takes a string as an argument? Yes, you require a constructor which takes a string as argument. Yes. Write a string, a message, some message, right? Now this particular message you want to be printed by what is called as flipper of MSG. Right? Let me just show you output, then we will see the description. Now where exception is printing? Isn't printing as a description for your exception? Not as a separate println statement, right? Shall we do the same thing with respect to two old extents, your runtime exception? Copy, pasted, constructor is too old. To old constructor, take a message, that message you pass to a print stack trace. What a message you have to put when this particular statement occurs? You need to print a statement something like, you are too old for a match. Double quote, paste it. This message I am passing, this will be executed when you have called this particular constructor. Now let me make age as a 61 and just a cross check. Will it print that particular exception for me or not? Compiled fine, executed fine, and it is showing an exception saying that you are too old for finding a match, right? If I have given a valid value, something like this, it should not call any of my exceptions, right? So rather it should print your statement saying that soon you will find a match. Right? So let me summarize the points for you once, then I'll answer your questions in the chat box. Point number 1. Your user defined exceptions will be raised by using a keyword called a throw. That is the first point. For a throw keyword, you need to pass a value whichever is the throwable object, right? It can be a directly object of a throwable class or a subclass of your throwable class. Second one, whenever you are defining your user defined exception class, extend that particular exception, because that is the user defined class, right? You don't wanted a user defined class, rather you wanted a subclass of your exception class. So you will be using a extends and extending a runtime exception. If you are clear with this example, then I will tell you why I have taken runtime exception only. For a time being, just have that particular runtime exception you are extending, right? Now my intention is, as a class is extending a runtime exception, now this particular class has become a subclass of your exception class. Clear? Whenever an object of a class has been created, its constructor will be executed. Keeping that one as a point in the mind, I have created a constructor, wrote some message with respect to constructor. Later I felt that if I am writing a normal system.out.println statement, it was a printing like a normal statement. Now I don't wanted to print a description as a normal statement, rather I wanted to print it as a description from a print stack trace. So I have used a method called a super of a message. What does a super of a message says? That you don't print the information, rather you call someone who is responsible for printing a standard messages, standard information, right? Who is that person who is responsible for printing a standard messages or a standard exceptions? Is there is a something called as a print stack trace method, right? If I am writing a super is nothing but a parent, right? Who is the parent of your too old exception? Runtime exception, right? So under a runtime exception, you will be having a print stack trace, because it is ultimately extending your throwable class, right? So now this particular MSG will be given to a print stack trace for printing the information, right? So take some time, go through the example carefully. I'll be keeping this example as it is. I'll be just answering the questions in the chat box. How will I print if we write that? That only I'm telling you. You are not printing this. You will be calling a print stack trace, which will be present in a parent class, right? So in a parent class, you will be having a method with respect to print stack trace. You are calling that particular constructor. Super of message is nothing but calling a parent class constructor, right? So in a parent class constructor, there will be a print stack trace that will take care of printing this message for you. I am writing a parameterized constructor, yes, but within a parameterized constructor, what I am writing? Within a parameterized constructor, I am just calling my parent class constructor. right? So parent class constructor is responsible for printing that particular message for me. Is that clear?
Sir, rather than taking 2n constructor, can't we directly use runtime exception constructor, sir?
Runtime exception constructor means you don't, so means our intention is first we wanted to define our own exception class, right? So when you are passing an argument here, if you are writing a throw new to end, here your class's constructor will be executed, right? How you will execute your runtime exception class,
Yeah, sir. Okay, got it.
right? We are calling this particular exception based on our requirement. If you are using a runtime, if you are calling exceptions with respect to runtime, all those things will be a standard exceptions like a division by zero, arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, right? All those things are a part of your runtime exception. And those things will be called implicitly by the system, not explicitly.
Yes, sir. Got it, sir. Thanks.
Right? So I'll be ending the session now. Bye bye.